Imagine a 13-year-old standing in a courtroom, facing some of the most powerful figures in the legal world. Now, picture this. A young black kid, armed with nothing but his sharp mind and determination, delivers an argument so convincing that it leaves everyone in the room stunned. No one expected it. The attorneys, the judge, even the audience. They were all caught off guard by his brilliance. But how did this young teen manage to pull off something so incredible? Was it luck, or is there more to this story than meets the eye? In this video, we're diving into the unbelievable moment that shocked a courtroom, explore how a teen's legal reasoning turned heads, and set the stage for something much bigger than anyone had anticipated. Stick around because what happens next is nothing short of jaw-dropping. It all started when Jamal, a 13-year-old from a small neighborhood, found himself in an unlikely situation. His mother had been wrongly accused of a crime she didn't commit, and the case was headed for trial. Jamal, though just a teenager, had been quietly reading up on legal cases for months. His fascination with law grew after hearing stories of wrongful convictions in his community. He knew the facts and the law better than most adults, but it wasn't until his mom's trial that his knowledge would be put to the test. On that fateful day, with his mom's future on the line, Jamal decided to speak up. He approached the defense team, offering his insights on a crucial legal loophole they'd missed. The team hesitated, unsure of a young kid's ability to make a difference, but they had no other choice. What Jamal said next would change everything. Jamal's decision to step into the legal battle wasn't without its risks. The courtroom, already filled with tension, suddenly seemed more hostile. His mother sat there, nervous but hopeful, while Jamal's heart raced. The defense attorney, Mr. Thompson, was a seasoned lawyer, known for his sharp mind, but skeptical of Jamal's ability to contribute. He'd seen it all, years of legal battles, all of which had led him to trust experience over anything else. But Jamal's arguments, drawn from his knowledge of similar cases, were impossible to ignore. As Jamal began speaking, his voice steady despite his age, the prosecutor, a fierce and sharp-witted woman named Miss Harris, narrowed her eyes. She'd been preparing for this case for months, and a child's sudden intervention could unravel everything she'd worked so hard for. The tension between her and Jamal was palpable. She tried to catch him off guard, throwing difficult legal terms and complex arguments his way, hoping to shut him down. But each time, Jamal calmly responded, offering well-researched points that made even some of the more experienced lawyers in the room exchange surprised glances. His arguments centered on a key piece of evidence that had been overlooked, an outdated law that could discredit the prosecution's case. Jamal wasn't just challenging the system, he was exposing flaws that no one had expected a kid to find. And with each counterpoint, he dug deeper into the core of the case, leaving the jury and the entire courtroom questioning everything they thought they knew. But even as Jamal gained ground, the question lingered. Could a 13-year-old really have the power to turn the tide in such a high-stakes trial? And would his youth be used against him in the end, making his argument feel less credible, no matter how strong it was? As the court broke for lunch, whispers filled the room. Some were impressed, others were doubtful, but one thing was clear: Jamal wasn't backing down, and whatever happened next would change everything. As the lunch break came to an end, the courtroom buzzed with energy, a mix of disbelief and curiosity hanging in the air. Jamal sat quietly with his mother, his thoughts racing. He knew the hardest part was yet to come. The prosecutor, Miss Harris, would be prepared now, expecting him to dig deeper, and she wouldn't let him have an easy ride. The stakes were higher than ever. When the trial resumed, the tension in the room was suffocating. Jamal could feel the eyes of the jury on him, and he knew that the smallest mistake could change everything. The defense team, while initially skeptical, had started to rally behind him, trusting his insight. Mr. Thompson stood by his side, but it was clear that Jamal had taken the lead in this battle. Even the judge, a stern figure who'd initially dismissed Jamal as a distraction, was now watching intently, leaning forward as if intrigued by the unfolding events. Then it happened. Miss Harris, in an attempt to throw Jamal off, raised a challenge that seemed nearly impossible to counter. She introduced a new piece of evidence, one that seemed to completely dismantle Jamal's argument. The room fell silent. Everyone was waiting to see how Jamal would respond. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind remained sharp, focused. Jamal could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had no time to hesitate. If he didn't find a way to counter this new evidence, it would all be over. His mother's future, the case, everything. He stood up, his hands trembling slightly, but his voice unwavering as he addressed the court. "Your Honor," he began, his words steady despite the storm inside him. "I may not be an expert in the law, but I know the truth when I see it, and this doesn't add up." The room fell even quieter. The jury watched closely, unsure of what would come next. Jamal's every word seemed to hold the weight of the entire case. Could he find a way to turn this moment around? Or would the final blow come from the very system he was trying to challenge? Jamal's voice echoed through the courtroom as he pointed out the inconsistencies in the prosecution's new evidence. The audience was on edge, but something unexpected happened. Just as Jamal was about to make his final argument, the prosecutor, Miss Harris, slid an envelope across the table with a grim smile. "Your Honor," she said coolly, "I think it's time we show the defense a little something they weren't aware of." The judge motioned for her to continue, and with a quick glance, Miss Harris unfolded a piece of paper, revealing a sealed document that no one had seen before. "This," she announced, "is new, recently discovered evidence that directly links the defendant to the crime." Gasps filled the room. Jamal's stomach dropped. He hadn't seen this coming. This wasn't just a legal loophole, it was a game changer. The defense team exchanged worried glances. Mr. Thompson, who had been leaning on Jamal's expertise, suddenly looked shaken. Jamal's mom, still sitting in the defendant's chair, reached for his hand, her face pale. The weight of this new evidence was undeniable. It appeared to be the smoking gun they had been looking for. Jamal's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. How could they have missed this? Could Miss Harris really have kept this hidden all along? The stakes were higher than ever. If this evidence stood, Jamal's entire argument could collapse in an instant. It wasn't just his mom's future at risk anymore. It felt like the very foundation of the legal system itself was about to crumble. But then, just as the tension reached its peak, Jamal noticed something odd. There, in the corner of the document, was a small detail, a date, a signature, that didn't seem to match up with the rest of the information. He could barely believe his eyes. Could it be a mistake, a forgery? With every ounce of courage he had left, Jamal stood tall, facing the judge and the courtroom, his heart pounding. "Your Honor," he said, his voice unwavering, "I believe this document is a fake." The courtroom went silent. Was Jamal truly about to turn the tables again, or was this his final mistake? The room held its breath as Jamal's words hung in the air. The judge looked at the document, then back at Jamal, as if trying to decide whether this was the final straw or a last-ditch plea. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Miss Harris' confident smile wavered, just slightly, but it was enough to catch Jamal's attention. He could feel the energy shift in the courtroom. The prosecutor had been too sure of herself, too polished. Was this her slip-up? Jamal motioned toward the corner of the document again. "This date doesn't match the records from the investigation," he said, his voice now calm but full of conviction. "And the signature, it's inconsistent with the one on the official files. I believe this is a forgery, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Miss Harris' expression flickered for the briefest moment, but it was enough for Jamal to sense something deeper. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed, a slow realization creeping over her face. She hadn't expected him to catch it. Not a 13-year-old, and yet here he was, unmasking her. The judge motioned for a recess. As the courtroom emptied out, Jamal's heart was racing. Could this be it? Had he just uncovered the last piece of the puzzle? During the break, Mr. Thompson hurried to Jamal, looking both amazed and concerned. "Kid," he said, "You just might have cracked the case wide open." But even as he said it, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had noticed the smallest of details, the inconsistencies. But this whole thing felt too complicated, too personal. Could Miss Harris have planted the fake document herself, or had someone else been pulling the strings? When the trial resumed, the tension was unbearable. The judge had ordered an investigation into the forged document, and it seemed like Jamal had finally won. But just before the final decision was made, an unexpected twist threw everything into chaos. The defense team had barely begun to relax when the doors to the courtroom suddenly swung open, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped forward. It was a private investigator, someone no one had anticipated. In his hands, he held a piece of new evidence, an audio recording of a phone call that had taken place between Miss Harris and an anonymous source just days before the trial began. The recording revealed something that no one could have predicted. Miss Harris had been offered a bribe. Someone had promised her a huge sum of money in exchange for ensuring the conviction of Jamal's mother, even if it meant falsifying evidence. The shock in the courtroom was palpable. Miss Harris' face went ashen, her composure shattered. She had been playing a dangerous game all along. And now everything she'd worked for was crumbling, the truth exposed for all to see. Jamal's mind was spinning. The victory was almost too much to comprehend, but he could feel the weight of it. His mother was free, the case overturned, and the corrupt prosecutor exposed. Yet, something still gnawed at him. Who had made the call to Miss Harris? And why had they tried to take down his family in the first place? As the gavel slammed down, declaring the case dismissed, Jamal knew that while the battle had been won, the war was far from over. As the trial came to a close, Jamal's life slowly returned to normal, but it was clear he would never be the same. His mother, exonerated and free, hugged him tightly, her eyes filled with gratitude. The courtroom's tension had finally dissolved, but the lessons Jamal had learned would stay with him forever. He had proven that age and experience didn't define a person's worth. Bravery, knowledge, and integrity did. The identity of the anonymous figure who'd tried to manipulate the trial was eventually uncovered. It was a powerful political figure with ties to Miss Harris, someone hoping to use the case to push their own agenda. The revelation shocked the community and led to several arrests. For Jamal, it wasn't just about winning. It was about seeing justice in its purest form. As he walked away from the courthouse, he knew that this victory wasn't just for his family. It was for everyone who had ever felt powerless. And for the first time in his life, Jamal truly believed in the power of truth.